Good afternoon, and welcome to Plymouth Town Crier. Your host today, Alan Costello. We're here today to talk about the upcoming spring town election here in Plymouth, election 2021. We're going to do a series on Plymouth Town Crier of candidate spotlights. We'll bring to you all the particular candidates running for all the various offices throughout the next several weeks. Today, we're joined by a candidate for Select Board, Mr. Harry Helm. Mr. Helm, welcome today to Plymouth Town Crier.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
As we socially distance.
As we try to social distance.
On the opposite side of your kitchen.
We're trying this out. Mr. Helm's vaccinated. I have social distancing and a mask, so we'll try to keep this thing as best we can up to all acceptable levels. But we'd like to get some information to you today regarding the Select Board race. Are there any opening statement you might like to have, Mr. Helm, or would you like to go right into questions?
We can go quickly to questions, but I just would like to point out some of my history. I have been a homeowner in Plymouth since 1995. 8 years ago, I moved here permanently. I have been on the Finance Advisory and Finance Committee nearly all of that time, and I'm currently the first vice chairman of that committee. I am also the vice chair of the Manomet Village Steering Committee, and I have been on a couple other committees over that time. So I have been involved with the town. I love this town. I can't imagine living anywhere else, and I'm excited to be running for the Select Board because I think that the town is at an inflection point and we need to address some issues sooner rather than later.
Very good. I appreciate that. Now we'll go right into questions. As I speak to other Select Board candidates in the upcoming week, I'll give them the same 6 questions we're about to give Mr. Helm. And we'll start out with a very rudimentary, simple question. Mr. Helm, why are you interested in becoming a member of the Plymouth Select Board?
Well, I mentioned a couple seconds ago that I believe that we are at an inflection point. And by that, I mean we could go one of many directions. A number of them are probably not in the most positive direction. The town, there are some issues that need to be addressed. Accountability, transparency, and tax efficiency. And these all need to be addressed, as I mentioned, sooner rather than later. And I've been on the Advisory and Finance Committee a number of years, and the reason for that is that I felt I was making a positive difference in town government. I now look around, and I think that my experience, my background, will much better serve the residents of Plymouth on the Select Board at this point.
Okay, very good, Mr. Helm. You actually segued into my next question. What particular skills can you, Mr. Helm, bring to the board that will help solve some issues concerning the town during these difficult times?
Well, I think one of the things that I bring is experience. I mean, you know, as most people know, the Advisory and Finance Committee reviews all of the warrants and discusses all of them and discusses things that are not involved in the warrant but affect the financial condition of the town of Plymouth. And I think that experience really is key. It's helped me develop my understanding of how things work in this town, to develop the understanding that changes needed to be made. So there is that. But further in my background, I have 30 years business experience, which includes management at director level and vice president level in both retail at major corporations such as Kmart and Barnes & Noble, as well as at major publishers. So, and I had a great deal of financial responsibility marketing responsibility as well, but I've got a good background to understand the numbers involved. And when you're talking about things like tax efficiency and improving the situation with the burdensome taxes on our residents, I think that will come into play.
Very good. Appreciate that answer. And that leads to another question that's been a question in the forefront the last several years for anyone running for select board. As you know, there's a huge residential burden, a huge residential tax burden on the resident themselves, and that really has to be addressed by commercial and industrial type taxes. What would some of your constructive plans be to increase the commercial tax base here in Plymouth?
Well, I think one of the first things that we need to do is review the current commercial zoning, not with an eye for expanding it. I have done a fair amount of reading on this, and I've come across enough research that demonstrates that very often it is not about the increasing the amount of commercial space in a town. It's about using the space that you currently have as best as possible. And I can tell you for sure, the best way to use it is not more big box retail and not more restaurants and fast food joints. The way to go is to create an environment where we're bringing in light industrial and office jobs. Not only are they higher value and will assess higher value for the purposes of taxes, they're also going to bring in better jobs. One of the first things that I came across when I was on the finance committee, it was a report, I don't know who was giving it to us, and they were talking about, they handed it out and they were talking about all sorts of things, and I flipped to the back and there was a really interesting article that they didn't discuss. And this was many years ago, 5-6 years ago, something like that. It indicated that the town of Plymouth was among the 10 bottom towns, the lowest towns, not 10%, but 10 out of all of the hundreds of towns in Massachusetts when you measured the average yearly salary of people who lived and worked in the town. That is a clear indication we need better jobs. So commercial development, light industrial, office increases our tax base, but it also increases the type of jobs that are available for our children and grandchildren.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you for that last answer, Mr. Helm. The next question is a question that's going to be on the ballot as well. The resident will have an opportunity to vote on the forming of a charter commission. A charter commission would be a group that's assembled, if it passes, to review the form of government that we presently have here in Plymouth, as you know, our representative town meeting, or they could look at all other options of governments that are available to a town our size. What are your thoughts on the forming of a charter commission?
Well, I'm in favor of the idea of a charter commission, but I'm in favor of, and I will support, whatever the residents, the voters of Plymouth decide on this subject. If they do determine that a charter commission is necessary, obviously there's a whole range of things that charter commission could come up with for the voters to vote on later. It could be tweaking, adjusting the current town form of government, or they could suggest a complete change to some version of a city form of government, and there are several of those. But what I would like to encourage everybody to realize and remember when they're voting, regardless of the form of government, town or city, the problems that face Plymouth aren't going to change. The Charter Commission and its findings and what the voters agree on or don't agree on is not a magic wand. It is not going to change our tax situation. It is not going to change the need for more accountability on the part of our town government and town administration, and it's not going to change the level or lack thereof of transparency that is currently manifested in our government. So, I mean, I don't want to overly caution people. I just want to remind people this is something that they'll get to determine, but always remember our problems are going to remain.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again. All right, we'll go more to a current event type question. This recently happened within the last month. What is your opinion on the recent planning board decision regarding an existing land covenant on Bump Rock Road?
You know, that is an extremely, actually, in my mind, complex. The answer to that is extremely complex. So hopefully I'll be able to explain my position on it. First of all, one thing that the voters should know about me as a candidate and about as I would work as a future select board member, I do not form opinions and decisions until I feel that I have received all of the information needed to form that opinion. I have my thoughts on what they decided, but I haven't seen all sides of this story, and I'm not sure everybody has, which leads me really to the heart of what I want to say. The planning board is an elected board. They are responsible to the voters and the residents of Plymouth, and I do not feel this recent Bump Rock Road fiasco really demonstrated, once again, transparency on their part or accountability. And I know I keep going back to transparency and accountability, but they are key to fixing every other problem. Without transparency, accountability is impossible. Without accountability, tax efficiency and limiting, changing the upward spiral of taxes in this town will be impossible. So I think that the planning board decision was sort of a adventure in lack of accountability to the voters, and also a lack of transparency.
Okay, thank you. And we'll finish up with this one last question, and it sort of goes back to the economic development of the town. But how can the town backfill lost tax revenue with the recent closing of the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station?
Well, obviously, one of the ways is to bring the town to 30% commercial tax as part of the tax base. Currently, we're at 10%. Okay, there is no healthy town that has ever been identified healthy in terms of a lack of burden on the residential taxpayers that has a 10%. I know that there is the feeling that maybe that keeps our hometown feel, but continuing with only 10% commercial as part of our tax base will end that hometown feel over time and make it very difficult for the residents of this town to afford their taxes. So that's one way, but that's going to take a couple decades. And it would have been nice to be addressing this before the power plant went away. But we're here where we are now, and we need to move forward. We have to start now the process of removing the sunset clause of the meals tax that is currently paying for town hall. That will sunset. Once the town hall is paid off, that tax is set to go away. And that is not something that you just click your fingers or wish into existence, that change and keeping it, in place. That's at the state level. It takes time. We need to start now, because that meals tax is an important revenue source for the town of Plymouth. I also feel very strongly that we need to reinstate the Revenue Ideas Task Force. If people look back in time and look at some of the ideas that they came up with, they are pretty creative and amazing. And few of them actually involve increasing taxes or fees. A couple of them that I thought were interesting involve the town creating new services that they will charge for, both residents and tourists. And that would be a great revenue enhancement. They also made suggestions about how to more efficiently spend the taxes that we do get. So I think that group needs to be reinstated. And I think that we really need to finally push through whatever wall is holding back on a serious look and determination and decision on consolidating, where possible, town and school district functions.
Just want to remind the viewer, the voter of Plymouth, that the upcoming election, which is May 15th, will have several different offices. But this one particular race, the select board race, has four gentlemen running for the one position. It's a 3-year term. The incumbent, Mr. Ken Tavares, will be on the ballot, as well as Everett Malaguti, a town meeting member from Precinct 1, a gentleman by the name of Michael Heath, and then, of course, our guest today, Mr. Harry Helm. Mr. Helm, do you have any final wrap-up words or statement you might like to let the resident and voter know about?
Sure. Let me just say that my priority is the residents and the taxpayers of Plymouth. And to that end, I think there are 3 priorities that we must begin to address immediately. And I've mentioned them over the period of these questions, but I'm going to just go back at them. First, we need to address tax control in this town. Our property taxes have become a burden to most residents, and we have to take leadership in stopping, controlling, whatever, this relentless upward spiral of property taxes. And as I mentioned, a tax base of only 10% commercial contribution is not sustainable. We have to push ourselves to achieve at least a 30% commercial tax base. And this is entirely doable, but it's going to take time. So we have to develop new non-tax, emphasis on the non-tax revenue streams. As I mentioned, I believe we need to reinstate the Revenue Ideas Task Force for the reasons that I stated earlier. We need to, once again, start working now to remove the sunset provision or the sunset clause on the meals tax. And of course, we have to work on the consolidation of town and school functions. All of this is about addressing town governmental inefficiency. And while we're looking at town governmental inefficiency, we need to answer this question. Why can't Plymouth seem to build anything right the first time? South High School, the sewer system, the library roof, the sewer system at the airport. The list goes on and on and on, and we have to answer that. And that goes to my second point, accountability. We must begin demanding a higher degree of accountability by both our governmental and our administration officials. Currently, it appears that no one in government or management is held accountable for anything. Mistakes are buried instead of learned from. Problems are hidden and left to suddenly reappear at a greater cost to taxpayers. The residents must be respected in all dealings. We, whether we are elected or we are paid by them, we are here to represent them, not ourselves. Third, our town government and administration must become transparent in all of its dealings. Easier access to information is needed for our residents to make informed opinions and decisions and to hold officials accountable. So transparency is the base of accountability. Accountability cannot exist without transparency. So thank you all for taking your time to watch this presentation. Thank you, Alan, for inviting me. And I hope all of you will support me on May 15th. But regardless of which candidate you do support, I really urge you to vote. It matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Helm. I appreciate all your answers, and I appreciate your time this afternoon. And I'd like to also remind our viewers that May 15th is an important day to get out to vote as best you can. There'll be some early voting in town. I believe that starts in the next 2 weeks, but Pearl Sears, the town clerk, would be a perfect person to contact to see when ballots can be sent out. I'd also like to thank you for tuning in, the viewing audience. We're going to put together these spotlights on multiple candidates. We have a charter review group of candidates. We have select board, as we did today. The planning board has interesting race. There's 2 seats, 4 individuals running for 2 seats. In the school committee has, I believe, 9 candidates. So it's a pretty active election season. So tune in to Plymouth Town Crier. Subscribe if you haven't already to the channel. Like the channel. And we'll make sure that we get you the very most current, even, balanced content we can, so you'll be able to make the best informed decision come May 15th. Thank you very much. This is Alan Costello